Good evening. Welcome to our event this evening. I'm Jacques Smith. I am first the program manager of the Black American Council here at Cuyahoga Community College, which is a sponsoring supporter of our event this evening. And I'm also a proud life member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, one of the members of the Men of the Divine Nine Committee who brought everything together this evening. I thank you all for being here. And on behalf of our college president, Dr. Alex Johnson, and our campus president, Dr. Michael Scope, we really appreciate you being here. We excuse ourselves for the time, didn't realize there was going to be a little parking issue this evening, but we're here and we thank you for being here. Thank you very much for being here. We will now have our agenda setting from our next panelist, or I should say our member, Ife Claytor.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ife Claytor. I was happy to be part of the planning committee and also a proud brother of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated. Just setting the mood and the purpose for what we're here for, the Men of the Divine Nine, Black Greek Letter Fraternities, Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated, Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated, Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated, and Iota Phi Theta Fraternity Incorporated have come together to host this panel to shed light on the domestic violence epidemic and provide information and resources to victim survivors, their families and supporters, and those who may struggle with mental health and control issues. We're happy to have you all here. We're going to have I'm going to introduce our two moderators, and they will introduce our panelists. We will do some questions that we have prepared, and then we will open up the floor for questions from the audience, at which time you all will be directed on how to voice your questions. Our two moderators are the Honorable Mayor Ben Halbert and Ms. Betty Halliburton, and I'll let them give a little bit about themselves now. Thank you. Enjoy the program.
Good evening, everybody. It's good to see everyone here tonight. Welcome to Tri-Cities campus. We appreciate the students who are here, and we appreciate everyone else who braved the elements and also braved a little bit of the traffic to be here. We have a very important program for you here tonight, and I'm very honored to be here with my good friend Betty Halliburton. We worked together many, many years ago in television, but we're always back together again trying to do great things for the community.
It's about having an impact. Thanks, Ben. It's a pleasure to be a part of this discussion tonight, and as you know, this is a very important topic that I think is important, but before we do anything, let's thank the Divine Nine, the men of Divine Nine, for having interest in this critical time.
So, ladies and gentlemen, what's going to happen is this program is roughly about 2 hours long, but what we're going to do is we're going to have our panelists be able to talk a little bit of time, but we really want to get your questions and your give you some answers as well. You know, the disclaimer that we want to provide you up front is that tonight we are looking to talk about this issue, but it's not necessarily a situation where we expect to get answers and solve all the world's problems about domestic violence within 90 minutes. That's just not going to happen. But what we really hope will happen here is that you hear something tonight, that you go back to your respective organizations, you go back to your churches, civic groups or whatnot, and begin the conversation to make sure that you talk about the issue of domestic violence. You know, there may be someone in this audience right now who may know someone who is either a victim, or you may know somebody who may think about victimizing. So what we hope is that what you hear tonight will be able to help both of those parties in our discussion and our conversation.
It's about time to be transparent. We all grew up in situations where what goes on in our house stays in our house, and we have this hush-hush mentality. It's time to break all those barriers so that others can be helped, healed, and not hurt. We are so... Go ahead.
You're absolutely right.
I mean, that's what time it is. And if not us, who? If not now, when? Right? So we are so elated about having such a distinguished panel, group of panelists. We have 8 people on the panel, and we're going to ask our panel to help us get the significance of this program by being brief with their introductory remarks. When Ben and I call your name, please briefly tell us your professional background or story, and limit it to around 30 seconds. I know I can be long-winded, so I'm not saying that about my panelists, but I can. Why you accepted this call. Because that's what it is. It's a call It's a call for action, and it's a call for action now.
That's exactly right. So what we're going to do is a little different way of introducing the panel, but we want to really just ask the panel. We see them sitting there, but we want to know why they're here. So we're going to start off with Michael Ryan. Michael Ryan, if you can tell us a little bit about who you are, but why you wanted to be here this evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Appreciate that. Again, my name is Michael Ryan. I'm actually a judge for the Cuyahoga County Court of Common Pleas Juvenile Division. And while I've been there for the last 6 years hearing cases involving juveniles and families, I was a municipal court judge for 7 years prior to that. And in my capacity there, I was involved in a number of domestic violence related issues. I was one of 2 judges who started the dedicated domestic violence docket. I have also been involved in teen domestic violence workshops, in both being a facilitator and also a leader in those particular events. And more personally, I am a survivor of domestic violence in that I watched my mom be beaten from the time I was 4 until I was 11 years old by the person who I thought was my dad. And so I have both a professional and personal perspective about domestic violence, and so that's the reason why I came out here tonight, to provide some insight and hopefully answer some questions, as well as provide some possible solutions to, if not eradicate this, at least diminish it, so that we don't have unfortunate incidents like we did with Aisha.
Thank you, Judge. And now we have Judge C. Ellen Connolly. Tell us a little bit about why you're here and what you want to bring out tonight.
Okay, my name is Judge C. Ellen Connolly. I was retired from Cleveland Municipal Court. I was also president of Cuyahoga County Council. When I first became a judge, there was no such law as domestic violence. It was enacted early in my career. One of the last cases that I had as a municipal court judge, I was sitting by assignment, and a woman came in and she was a victim of domestic violence. And I basically yelled at her and said, "You got to get away from this guy. He's going to kill you." And I gave him the maximum penalty, and several months later he killed her. And so I got a lot of media coverage of that. It was really, I think about her often. In the past couple of weeks, I've written a couple of articles for Cool Cleveland about Aisha's death, and you might want to read them. They're on coolcleveland.com, and my last one was reprinted by Richard Andrews in The Real Deal. So that's kind of my interest in domestic violence.
Thank you.
My name is John Twyman. I'm the assistant pastor of the Blessed Hope Missionary Baptist Church here in Cleveland, Ohio. I have a love for people. I believe that God gives us 2 basic commands, to love God and then to love people. So for me, this is one of the big reasons why I'm here. I feel as if I'm a first responder in many ways. Many people don't call the police, but they'll call their pastor, they'll call their church to discuss these issues. And many times we don't have the resources or the capabilities to direct them in the right manner. So I believe that those of us that do know the right thing to do should be able to speak up and try to help others to know what to do.
Next, we have Ms. Michelle Kinney. Tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're here tonight.
Good evening. I'm here this evening. My sister was murdered in 2005. She was murdered by her fiance, and he murdered her in front of her children. I took those children on with me and raised them along with my daughter. I'm here to talk about the effect that domestic violence and murder has on children, how it affects the family, and how you can assist and watch that before it actually happens, and how you can help out the children and the families that get affected by those that get murdered.
Thank you, Michelle. Nikki, you're here as well. Tell us why.
And could everyone please speak into the mic? They're not having, you could scoot up the mics a little bit and speak into them because they're having problems hearing you. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Nikki Miller. I am a breakthrough coach and self-help author of 3 empowerment journals called The Power of I Am. I'm the founder of a movement and a platform that I created called I Am Mirror Messages to help build the self-esteem and positive mindset of women and girls facing domestic violence and low self-esteem. I have very close friends and family members who have actually experienced domestic violence, and one that's still currently in the situation, and we're trying to get her out. But the reason why I'm here is because I'm on a mission to change the culture, and in order for me to do that, I have to be involved. So I do work with not just women who are in different shelters or going through different situations, but I also work with the children. What I have noticed is that boys and girls are dealing with low self-esteem, and it comes from different experiences and different situations that they are experiencing in their home. So that's why I'm here.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And next we have?
Good evening. I'm Carrie Joseph. I'm the Multicultural Services and Education Manager for the Domestic Violence and Child Advocacy Center. So my role is to make sure that people know that there are resources available. We do outreach, education to raise awareness so that we can help. We want to see to reduce the risk of abuse to children and adults. And for me, it's a personal passion to see that children, our silent victims, our smallest victims, do get the resources that they need to get through the trauma that they're impacted with.
Kathy, you're here as well. Mic number 8. Kathy, you're here as well. Tell us why.
I'm not really sure why I'm here. I'm a retired police officer from Mentor. I was there for 30 years. I was a juvenile officer, so I ended up seeing a lot of family violence with kids. But I retired, and for the last almost 15 years, I've been a victim advocate at Willoughby Police. And it really hurts me to see victims coming to court sometimes 3 and 4 times on the same offender, and their heart says one thing and their head says another. And I mean, I really worry about them. We try and give them as many resources as we can, but you know, you can only do so much. So I really am looking for answers myself. I was planning on being up there and asking questions.
So now you know why you're here. First, you have a heart to help people, and you have a history. You were on many calls where there were domestic violence issues, and now you're volunteering, helping others. We all have a purpose for being here today. I think you found yours. So thank you for joining us. Lisa is next. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, good evening. My name is Lisa Hussamadeen. I actually am here with several hats on. I'm a licensed professional mental health counselor. I also am employed here at Tri-C, so we are sponsoring this and helping out. I'm employed as a disabilities advisor. So I do come across a lot of disabilities, including mental health disorders, and my passion is helping, again, like a lot of the panelists, children and adults with esteem issues, and also to see if we can dispel some of the myths associated with mental health and substance abuse disorders, and also just give tips on how maybe you as an individual that know victims may be able to support them in appropriate manners, because there are a lot of things out there that you can do that, you know, may be appropriate or inappropriate because we just don't know. So my passion just lies there in helping out.
Well, we're here to continue this dialogue. We don't want this to be the only time. I was just at an event with my sorors from Delta Sigma Theta Incorporated, the Lemonade chapter, and we want these kind of conversations to continue. So we're going to start asking a few questions, and we hope that you guys are out there thinking as well as some of the things that you'd like to ask our panelists. There's a lot of misconceptions. First of all, we don't understand a lot about what one of our panelists just said. Well, why do they keep coming back? Why is it multiple times that we'll see the same case over and over again? Because there are the victims and there are the victimizers. But there are two people who always or should know that there is help available. And sometimes we don't know how to get that kind of help. So would one of the panelists discuss a little bit about, you know, what they've seen in their backgrounds that kind of sets the tone for what they have envisioned or seen firsthand in the domestic violence issues?
Well, as a judge, it was very frustrating to me. A woman would come in, and you know, she would be a victim, and you know, I missed my lunch hour or spend, you know, extra time making sure everything got signed and the protection order was granted, and you know, really go over and above because I was so concerned about the victim. And then the case would come back, and you'd see her come in arm with the defendant, and it was so frustrating to me, and the court personnel, all the court personnel would be angry. But then you can't blame the victim. You want to blame the victim, but you should not blame her because she's being re-victimized by the system that way. So, one of the best programs for domestic violence victims starts in a junior high school, where girls start in junior high school realizing that, they can't be treated a certain way. So it's got to start early.
I have just a personal statement, because I was young when I first started experiencing, my mom being beaten, strangled, slapped, slammed, stomped. And so I couldn't reconcile the fact that this man who I thought was my father, that I thought he loved her, and at the same time he was beating her. And what I didn't see my mom do is that she didn't reach out for any help. So I was then also confused as to why she would remain in this relationship. And it wasn't until I got older that I understood some of the reasoning behind her staying. Well, one, my dad, who wasn't my dad, actually stepped up to be my father, so I think she felt a sense of loyalty to him. Another thing is that he is the one that controlled the economics in the home. My mother, she was not working at certain points, and he was. So I learned that he was in control. That meant that if she tried to step out on her own, she'd be destitute. And she has 2 kids, she's by herself, so that was another reason why she wasn't leaving. Another issue is that it's the heart. This is a man that she loved, that she was attracted to, that she just kept going back to. And there's also this thing they call the domestic violence, the cycle of domestic violence, wherein he starts off, there's a tension building, and then there's a violent eruption, and then there's a honeymoon stage. And so she kept falling back into that honeymoon stage, thinking that, okay, he was going to get better, he wasn't going to commit this act again, but it kept happening year after year, month after month. And so we do have to actually understand those things that are pulling the victim back towards those relationships and try to find ways to sever that without hurting the victim emotionally. So these resources that we have available in the community, the Domestic Violence Advocacy Center, as well as other places, they can provide that assistance for those victims so they can find a pathway to removing themselves from those relationships without losing some of that economic stability or that emotional stability.
And the good part about this conversation, ladies and gentlemen, is this is like a roundtable discussion. Betty and I are just priming the pump with a couple of questions. But if anybody on any side of the table says, you know what, right, Judge Ryan, what you said about power and control, that strikes a chord with me. I want to pick up on what you said. Please do. Before you do, want to let everybody in the audience know if you have a card, we'll be coming around asking your questions, and depending on how the conversation goes, we may even let you have a microphone at one point in time. So now, power and control. Is domestic abuse about power and control? Skinny?
Yeah, actually it is, because when you think about the central word, from physical to mental to financial, the common denominator is control. And before a victim actually reaches out to the advocacy center, to the police department, the important part that anybody can play is family and friends, because it starts there first. I watched my sister get beat back and forth for 6 years before he murdered her. And like Judge Ryan said, it's a cycle. They were happy, then they start fighting, he start beating her up, then a year after that, she got pregnant, they had a child, and then after that, he beat her again, and then after that, they were planning a wedding. So we were almost getting ready to, have a wedding at a church and everything. And then after that, she went to school to be a nurse. She started trying to do things for herself, better herself, because he didn't really have anything. He was doing construction work, couldn't get jobs here or there, and he didn't want her to do anything to better herself. So she decided to leave. He walked away, found her on a date, followed the date, came back to the house, broke in the house, woke the children up. Their child together was 3 years old. They argued. She asked him to get out. She called me. I was rushing over there. He put 2 bullets in her head in front of the 3-year-old, and the 12-year-old was upstairs. So it is control. He did not want her to progress financially. So he tried to abuse her physically. Not tried to, but he did. He told her he was going to kill her, and he meant it. And most of the time, 99.9% of the time, when people say that, they mean it. It may take a year, it may take a week, but they mean it, because in the back of their mind, they still want that control. Yeah. So control is the central word for any type of abuse, whether it be from parents, whether it be from relationship.
I think we also have to be very proactive in our approach to domestic violence. Like, this is beautiful that we've gotten people together to talk about it after a major tragedy, but I think, as Michelle said, in most of our lives, we know people that are victims of domestic violence, and we don't say anything. We have fraternity brothers that may commit domestic violence in front of us, and we won't say anything. So until we step up and say, hey, some of these behaviors have to stop, it's going to continue. And then, as Judge Ryan said, even something as simple as economic control, we have to be proactive in training our men and our women on having savings, being good stewards of the things that God has given to them, because many times, I believe it's like 63% of all homeless women have been victims of domestic violence. So a lot of times you want to run, you want to go away, you want to leave, but you don't have any system, any plan in place, and you don't have people around you with the proper tools to help you to be able to do so, because if you do leave, it's a possibility you may end up being homeless. If you do leave, it's a possibility you won't be able to eat tomorrow. And most women, a lot of these situations, have children, so they're trying their best to make sure that even though they may be harmed, they're protecting their children and don't realize they're still putting their children in harm's way.
I looked at some research that says that a woman or the victim has been abused 35 times before they call the police. Yeah. 35 times.
Another thing is that oftentimes, because of the abuse and the control, the victim has nobody to go to, because the family has gotten so tired of saying, okay, 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 and the victim, they don't want to hear it anymore, so the victim has nobody to talk to and nobody to turn to, so they truly are alone, which means then they go back because they have nowhere else to go.
And just to add to that, with abuse, victims face a lot of shame and guilt. So it's not as easy as someone in a healthy relationship that would just leave a situation. They don't have the freedom to go out. It's actually dangerous sometimes. And like, you know, Judge Ryan and some of the others have said, you have children that are left behind. Who's going to care for that child? The other thing is that there's a thing called trauma bonding, and that is when a victim has been exposed to so much trauma and violence, and that perpetrator is the same person that gives that victim reward and love. So that victim develops a bond to the trauma. So when people are confused as to why a person wouldn't just leave, it's really a deep-rooted psychological issue that they have bonded with that trauma at that time. So it takes a lot of informative information, a lot of support, a lot of not telling someone, you know, if I was you, just leave, because what you do is you put yourself in the same position of control that abuser has. So now they have two people controlling them, the abuser and the person that they're trying to go to for support. And who's going to win out is the person that instills the most fear in them.
Yeah, I think there needs to be a calculated plan to leave those situations. You can't just do it immediately. The reason is because the most dangerous time for a woman is when she decides to leave.
Exactly.
Because he feels at that point, I've lost all control. And then all things are off the table. Consciousness is gone, and they're just thinking about how do they end that person's life.
Well, I was in the bank the other day, and this couple, we just got married, we want to put all our bank accounts together, and I wanted to say, wrong. When you get married, keep your own bank account, make sure you have your own credit rating. A friend of mine got divorced, and she couldn't even get a credit card because everything was in her husband's name. So, you know, I know everybody loves their husband, and they have these beautiful weddings and stuff, but keep your own bank accounts and keep your own credit rating.
Right. Let's clap for that.
You got an amen on that one, Joe.
There are a lot of stigmas, too. We have this misconception about what someone who's involved in a domestic violence situation looks like, and they can't be professionals, or, you know, they're all from the hood. Let's keep it real. they're doctors and lawyers and teachers and, you know, as we
Judges.
sit here, judges, and as we sit here today, as we sit here today and reflect, in our minds we see Aisha's face on November 17th that will forever change not only what happened to her, but her children. And our lives have been impacted because yet one more person lost their lives due to domestic violence. We have this stigma, though, and we got to stop it because it can happen anywhere, demographically. It can happen from one neighborhood to the next. That's not the issue. The color's not the issue. The issue is there is a sickness that is allowing itself to suck the lives out of people who we love and who we care about. So talk a little bit about that if you don't mind. And just so you know, there are cards being passed around. Write down your questions or your comments that you want to address to our panelists. And Ben is going to walk around looking like a talk show host tonight.
I think one way to try to remove that stigma is what Judge Connolly was suggesting, is that what we have been trying to do is to go into the schools, especially at a young age, go into the junior high schools and discuss with them, you know, the difference between healthy and unhealthy relationships, and also have frank conversations with the young men, because I think that's what we're missing, because they may see something different at home or see something different out in the community through the media and think that that's the appropriate way to react when you're frustrated with certain situations, as opposed to finding the correct way to deal with issues when you get angry or you disagree with someone. And so I think it's incumbent upon us to start these. We had teen domestic violence workshops that we did with students in the Cleveland Metropolitan School District, and we had them maybe 3 times a year. But like most good programs, they ended because of lack of resources. And we have so much influence here in this room, individuals who are part of the government, individuals who are on philanthropic organizations that can provide those resources for us so that we can start educating our young people so that stigma is removed and maybe we reduce the amount of people that are coming through the courts with these type of cases. But it's incumbent upon all of us. It's a call to action for all of us here today.
Amen.
Good deal. I had a question for the panel, and anybody can pick up on it. I want to sort of flip this over on the other side. There's a guy, and he's angry with his girlfriend, his wife, significant other, and happens to come to one of you all and say, you know what, I am so sick and tired of their mess. How do you talk them down? Or what would be the suggestion to do to make sure that that person realizes there is an outlet for you to go to keep you from taking that step that could be fatal?
Well, I would, we need to let folks know there are resources, and we have a 24-hour helpline. So no matter when it is, where it is, they can make that call. And, as friends, family, we can support them in making that call. So when we hear that, we can't just say, act like we didn't hear it, or, things will get better, because it usually doesn't get better. So it's important to help them make that call. And again, it's a 24-hour helpline. And I just want to mention, on piggyback on what Judge Ryan was saying, I think we all can be role models for our youth. We have so many youth that don't know what a healthy relationship looks like.
That's right.
So just having conversations and letting them know, how a woman should be treated, what a young lady should accept, how a man should treat a woman, that can make such a big difference in a child's life.
And they're never too young, like Judge is saying. We've spoken at schools where middle school girls are letting somebody whip their behind, and that doesn't make any sense. That they don't know what self-love is. Ben?
Okay, we have a couple of questions. One here says, I have a friend that is married and went through domestic violence. She wants to go get a divorce, but she loves him. She loves him very much, too much to leave.
Wow.
What do I tell her?
She's in a sick relationship.
What do you tell her?
She has to love herself more. She has to love herself more.
You gotta love you more. Miss Me, anybody else?
I mean, you just gotta tell her, say, listen, just maybe even write it down. What did he do to you? Like let's go through the steps. Look in the mirror, and sometimes, I know situations where, everybody, you can have wellness checks. You can call the police and say, I'm really concerned about so-and-so. I haven't heard from them. And, that, sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad. Sometimes, if somebody starts asking about it, then the person becomes more violent. But yeah, I think, this person's got to start looking in the mirror and saying, like, what am I doing with my life? And then say, hey, you know what? You got children. What are you doing to your children?
Sometimes you have to ask the question, do she love him more than she loves herself?
Exactly.
A lot of times in this situation, they do. And it comes with, like you said, the self-love. It always starts from home, and it starts when they're younger. A lot of, boys and girls are not told they are loved. You're beautiful, you're confident, you're handsome, those powerful words. And so if you meet someone along the way and they're telling you something that you've never heard, it's like a breath of fresh air. So if you've never been told I love you, if you've never been shown affection, and someone that comes along and you're attracted to, and they show you that for the very first time, that's it. As women, we look for the emotional part first.
Right.
Of course, everybody look at the physical, but then when we feel the emotional part, that's what traps us first. Then it becomes mental. So that's why a lot of people can't break away, and they ask, well, why you can't leave? Because it's the heart, and you don't think with your head. When it comes to men are more mental than emotional, so they're able to have that control. So it does start when they're younger. That's why, I'm in this and working with children on the whole self-esteem. They're not told I love you. They're not given hugs. Again, going to the schools, I had young boys come up to me and say, I deal with low self-esteem. A lot of times we focus on the girls, girl power, women power. Well, what about the boys? They're suffering a lot. And so, again, we need to look at both of it. I think, not just women, we do step up. I think the men need to step up a little more by giving young men hugs. You know what I mean? And so because of the affectionate part of it is the reason why people stay in there. But again, you have to ask her, do she love herself or do she love him more than she loves herself? And if she loves him more than she loves herself, then she needs to actually go see a therapist. And people need to surround her with love and support so that way she doesn't feel like she's alone.
At the church, when we counsel people on very similar topics like this, we help them to define what love is. Because so many people, as everyone has said, they've seen examples of what they thought was love. So when they get in these situations, they think that this is normal or this is okay. It's like everybody has a drawer at their house that's broke, and instead of you getting it fixed, you'll just use it forever and use it with the deficiency that it has because you're used to it being that way. So a lot of us see broken relationships from mother and father in our society, and then we don't realize that this is not what love is. So like with our young people at the church, that's one of the things we try to help them identify. What does love look like? Because love is not just a feeling, love is a choice. And if you're not choosing to love someone based on certain criteria, then you are in a crazy, messed up relationship, and you're harming yourself more than you're helping yourself.
And I would just add to that, friend, you may just want to say it's okay to love somebody and not be with them.
Yeah.
That's good.
So that's the one thing you definitely want to let them know. You can love, it's a natural feeling, it won't go away overnight, but again, referring her to seek some assistance and even offering to support her and go with her if she's having trouble with that first step of seeing someone. But let her know that you can love someone from afar in a healthier manner.
What I just wanted to say is I'm getting a lot of questions, which is perfect. This is perfect. This one is particularly of interest to me, where it says that this individual works in law enforcement. And this individual says that they've dealt with far too many cases where the victim's mother guilts her out of participating with the prosecution. So the prosecution is having difficulty combating the family over the domestic violence because they feel as though it is generational. So have you had any situations where the mom tells the daughter, look, he's a good man, he provides for you, you better take it and be quiet?
Yeah, and sometimes, when you made your bed, you better lay in it. I told you not to get together with him, and so now you're kind of stuck. Yeah, that happens.
Wow. Anybody else want to?
I had a friend, we was college, and we became a member of the organization together. Her husband, he was making $250,000 a year. She had to look a certain way. She had to act a certain way. She wanted to leave because he beat her. When he went to business trips, he would take the phone, the car keys, the computer, so she wouldn't have access to society. They had 2 small children together. So she talked to her mom. Her mom said, well, no, just hang in there. He's a good guy. This is what you went to college for, to find you a man who's going to take care of you. She had a career as a teacher, and it got to a point he lost his job, so he was unable to provide for her the way he was used to. So she filed for divorce. They had to meet at a central location for the children because the children were involved in it. They watched the abuse. And again, that goes back to that cycle because now the children are affected. And the day that he was supposed to bring the children, he dropped the children off at his sister's house, met at the apartment, beat her, killed her. And this was in 2011. This was in Atlanta, Georgia. And then he killed himself. So now the children don't have any parents after they've watched the abuse from the mom and the dad abusing the mom. So, but her mother encouraged her to stay because of his status in society, because of the money he was bringing, the beautiful house that they had, the wonderful vehicles. So family does have a strong effect, but family also has to understand that you can't promote that negativity because it affects the family that's watching, like those children. So now those children don't have parents. Now they don't know what love is, and it again goes back to that cycle. How are they going to be? We keep in touch with the children because they live with his parents in Texas. But watching them, trying to understand what they need to learn as far as relationships are concerned. Now they're out here living with his parents who are older, who don't have the ability to take care of them because nobody else would take care of the children. They were 5 and 6 at the time it happened. So again, families are very important. That is the start of any vision on seeing any abuse. And I know sometimes we've seen it and we may have said, you know, I'm tired of you calling me, why don't you just leave? But the important thing is that abusers do is isolation. Right. Never remove yourself from that no matter what, no matter how much you don't want to stay there, no matter how much that phone call you get irritated with, stay there anyway. Because as soon as that victim becomes isolated, then that full control takes over. Stay there. Don't encourage the negativity continuously because it happens generationally.
And what impact is it going to have on these young men? We see it a lot. I know a lot of the stories that we covered in the news business where they repeated what they saw. Yeah. And if these young girls are seeing it, that becomes also, in many cases, acceptable to them. Well, my mom stayed in that relationship, and that's how love looked to her. But I'm also, you know, heartbroken about what these little boys see and how they want to actually emulate that.
Well, you know, it's very sad. I have a situation in my family, so it's another city. Nobody knows about it. My cousin had an abusive husband, and now she lives with her son, and it sounds like her son is being abusive to her. Right. It's like, you can't talk because I'm working. You can't make any noise, you know, because I'm working. And I want to say, like, you're a victim of elder abuse.
Yeah. But I do want to add that, and that's when I talk about dispelling some of the myths, because it still is a choice. And statistically, females will exhibit that same behavior and seek out a partner of what they've been exposed to. Males, they do. We don't want to always leave that excuse up to the abuser because Judge Ryan is here and he's, you know, become, you know, a lead and successful person, and he experienced those same things and made a different type of choice. So that means that you do have the choice of choosing. It's not always that because I saw this, I have to do this. And abusers will. They're manipulative and deceitful people, so they love using excuses like that.
Well, I learned that domestic violence is a learned behavior. And if it's a learned behavior, that means you can unlearn it as well. So, and that's why, you know, I'm an advocate for going and teaching young men how to appropriately respond to situations where they get frustrated and they want to act out like they've seen their dads or their uncles do, and let them know that you don't have to make that choice. And I tell them about, my history and what I experienced, and I'm like, there's an alternative way of dealing with those circumstances. But like it's a choice, and we as men, we've got to stand up, and we've got to be more accountable to these young men, and we've got to be able to teach them.
There are so many good questions that are coming. This one says, please discuss the long-term effects of trauma. My aunt was killed by her husband in front of the children, who is now 40 years old, and they all suffer from post-traumatic stress destruction, despair. PTSD.
Trauma effects can last a lifetime, depending on the individual. Depending on the severity of it, it will be a lifelong process of seeking therapy and seeking assistance. Some people's personality may be able to bounce back and be a little more resilient than others, but in most cases, if it's children or whatnot, this will be a lifelong process. I would imagine that even those of us here that have been through this and that are successful and that we advocate still struggle with some of those memories and some of those issues that we went through when we were younger. So it is a lifelong process. And, unfortunately, there's a shortage of everything. There's shortages in the legal system, shortages in the therapeutic system, because you want to have appropriate counsel, because that can, also do harm and damage. So it probably will be a lifelong process of recovery.
I would have to agree, just from my own personal experience, because my niece, who was 3 at the time, she's now 17. So imagine a 3-year-old going to a daycare center, and daycare centers at that age, they talk about their parent. Imagine her conversation coming out, well, my daddy killed my mother. So having to be, particular about the daycare centers that the children go to, talking to the director, because some parents may get offended, well, I don't want my child at this daycare center if this is what my child is going to hear. But the effect that it has on her, she don't want that to be her last memory. So right after that, she remembered the happy memory, well, mommy and my daddy took me to the beach. So to overstep the negativity, she tried to be positive with it. But at the age of 11 and 12, she started embracing it, wanting to learn more about it and understand why the situation happened. And one of the great things that I ever did in regards to setting a foundation for that, even though I didn't know it was going to happen, was joining the church.
Amen.
Helping understand God, and I say HUG, help understand God, because that will force you to hug instead of putting your hand on someone. So when you have that foundation of understanding who God is, because when I think about God, and when you think about God, do you feel peace? Do you feel a sense of relaxation? Do you feel a sense of overcoming something that you've gone through? That is the best foundation. So when you try to unlearn a negative thing that you have watched over the years, find that positive foundation. And I found that in the Lord. Having that foundation, raising my nieces and my daughter in that foundation so they can understand who God is, so they can know what love really is. As Assistant Pastor John was saying, we teach love. What is love? Love is who God is. And when you think about that, you would think about bettering yourself. Because when you look around this audience, 1 in 4 people have experienced or been involved in domestic abuse. Just look around the room. Look at this table. 1 in 4. So let's understand who God is. Give a hug instead of a hand. Have that foundation.
This person says, as a victim of domestic violence and dealing with the judicial system while going through a divorce as a result of abuse, at that time no one offered Justice Center advocacy. Can Carrie please share the benefits of the Justice Center advocacy and what do they offer?
At DVCAC, we have justice system advocates who work in the suburban courts. But what their role is to help the victim through the legal process. So they will be with them the whole time they're trying to get the protection order. They will tell them, what to expect, what happens next, just to try to help make that process a lot smoother, because it is a difficult process and there's so many different things that are going to come up, but they can help them through that process. They will help them with the protection order. Now, we work in the suburban courts, but Witness Victims works in the Cleveland courts.
I work at Willoughby Police, so we get the reports from the day the report is made. We may get called out to the scene from the arrest, or we may get it the next morning, and we support the victim from the time of the report. If there's arrest, then we go on. If there's not an arrest, we go to the arraignment. Whether they go or not, we give them all their rights under Marcy anyway, but we did it before. And through every step of the way, as well as, if there's a protection order or if it's just a no contact order, and then until the sentencing, and if it's a felony, then we hand it out to our county advocates, and because there's a time lag, we now call them on the day that when it's bound over, and we fax them the report so that there isn't any lag time. And then if somebody doesn't contact, we tell them to keep in touch with us if they don't hear from them, and we will, if there's a conflict or whatever, we'll go with them, and I have all the way through to the sentencing and the common pleas court.
I think that you were talking about a stigma being out in society. Well, I think there was a stigma in the court system as well, because as Judge Connolly was saying, domestic violence wasn't even a violation when she first became a judge. And so there wasn't the seriousness that was taken with respect to domestic violence. I think that has changed over the years. There have been more resources that have been given to assisting victims in terms of the witness victim and domestic violence advocacy. But there's also been tools that have been given to judges. I am with the National Judicial Institute on Domestic Violence. And what that is, it's a group of judges who go around the country, and we teach other judges about domestic violence and how to handle complex domestic violence cases. And it's just not municipal court judges, but it's municipal court judges, it's common pleas court judges, and more important, domestic relations judges, because they have to have a balance of trying to protect the wife or the husband, but also providing support and visitation that the father has a right to. And they've got to make some very difficult choices on whether or not they cut off that visitation for the children with the father, try to build that relationship in order to protect the mother. And so we go through with them, in terms of what's the fatality factors. Has the husband threatened to kill you before? Do they own a weapon? Have they killed a pet? Or have they taken property from you? Are they isolating you? Those factors. And if we find a number of those factors, then that probably is a reason for a judge to say either supervised visitation or no visitation at all. Wow. But because that stigma was there, a lot of judges were just saying, he has a right to see the kids. But now I think more judges are balancing those choices because of the National Judicial Institute on Domestic Violence.
Just to kind of add to what Judge Ryan is saying, is when you have a defendant before you, you don't know what that person is going to do. It's an exact science. You want to say, like, is this kind of person going to reoffend? And so you have to look at those indicia, like Judge Ryan was saying, to determine. Some people, will be involved in a crime and you never ever see them again. And then some people are repeat offenders. But you have to use all of these tools to try to say, will this person, act again and become violent again? And there's enough tools out there to look if you take the time. Rely on your probation officer, listen to the victim. Has he been violent before? And then what used to really irritate me is the guy would be charged with domestic violence, and then he'd have his new woman with him, and she was like, well, you know, he didn't hit me, and I don't know, and I just want to like jump up and kill her. Yeah, just wait, your term hasn't come.
Judge, you could write a book.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
I just want to say also that I think it's also important that all of these advocacy groups are great to have, but many people in our communities don't know anything about them. We are the Divine Nine, right? We're the upper echelon of who we are. So a lot of times we may have access to these things, but I know at my church a lot of our membership doesn't have it. So when I see that, then I call someone like Judge Ryan to say, can you come in and have a meeting with us to help us discuss what's available to people that are around us, not just for me to know as the pastor, but for the other people to know that are in the congregation, because they may never call me, they may never call the police, they may never make it to the judicial system, but I believe we can take programs like this, not just on this large scale, but into our respective fraternities and sororities, into our chapters, into our social organizations, into our churches, because the more education people have, then the more they'll feel open to be able to discuss these things, and a lot of times they don't feel that way.
And
Yeah, I just want to add that the woman I told you that, you know, I told her the guy was going to kill her, and he did, she was a marriage counselor.
So you have some people who feel uncomfortable talking to certain people. We just have to find those resources for them. Believe it or not, there are people who suffer in silence and go to church every Sunday because we don't want them to know that we've been in a vulnerable situation like that. Now, if Deacon is beating his wife and somebody, oh, wait, hold up. I thought that was a sitcom.
That
or
happens.
something.
Yeah, it happens.
If that's a situation, many times you're sitting next to somebody and you have a little inkling that something's just right. My mother used to say, if it don't feel right, don't sound right, don't look right, it's not right.
Exactly.
If you see kids living in fear, you ever see that look on their face? It's nothing like a child who's afraid. It's more than reverencing his father. It's something, I'm afraid. I've seen it firsthand, and I am a survivor, and I live to tell you, you can make it through. If there is anybody in this audience, I have to do a pause for the cause. If you just slipped in here by accident, was invited by a friend, somebody from the Divine Nine, whoever you are, and you may be a victim tonight, I am just begging you to take that first step, because that's all it's going to take. Take the first step to the rest of your life, because tomorrow is not promised. If he says he's going to do something, 99% of the time, if he says he's going to kill you, please take it seriously. If he says, if I can't have you, nobody else will, please take it seriously. And you guys said something that's very important about that self-love. Let me tell you something. There's nothing like a mother's love. If you don't love yourself, love your children enough to try to find a way out. Just try. That's all. I'm sorry I had to take a pause for the cause.
And I just want to put a plug for some resources. I have a resource table out there that has resources available, the numbers to call. There's pocket cards, the small little cards. We like for people to take those, because even if they're still in a situation, they can put that in their shoe, and the person doesn't have to know that they're looking for help.
Right.
So, and they can call anonymously to start getting, see
help.
what they need to do to get the help. Right. So, and we have, you see our interpreters here. We try to make the services accessible to everybody. We have a deaf advocate that's here with us tonight. I have a bilingual advocate that's here tonight. So we do whatever we have to make sure that we can get services to individuals.
Amen.
Here's another question that came. Talk about the complications if it is a same-sex relationship or if the male is the one that's being abused.
Well, that happens all the time. And we do. Our statistics tell us 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men, but we know that's higher because men don't come forward as quickly. But we work with victims. So if a male is a victim, we can provide the services. So, and in same-sex couples, you have a victim and you have a perpetrator. We will work with the victim. So there's services available to everyone.
The law is gender neutral. It doesn't say male or female. It just says it's a family or household member. That's how it's defined as a victim.
I would say in the last year we've had more male victims than we've had in the past.
I would just say that no matter if it's male or female, if somebody's telling you they're abused, believe them. And I think that that's one reason that a lot of people don't come forward. Most people think that people won't believe them, especially like if you're a guy, right? Like, how do I tell somebody my girlfriend or my fiance or my wife is beating me up? Who's going to believe that? And if you've been raised to try not to hit back and try not to fight back, a lot of times you're putting yourself in a position where you can't win. So I believe everybody that tells me they're abused, whether it's male or female. If you tell me there's abuse going on, I believe you up front, and then I start to try to investigate on the back end instead of doing it the other way around.
And here goes another question, sort of a variation. I'm going to try to add a little variation to this, but they basically say, how can we support parents in accepting resources from community school districts when kids show signs of lack of emotional control, anger management, whatnot? And then also, too, if a teacher begins to see that a child is acting out emotionally, finding out that it's because there's domestic abuse at home, is there anything that a teacher can do?
Most of the schools
Yeah,
have
counselors.
Yeah, it's if a teacher discovers that a child is being abused, whether it's emotionally or physically, they have an obligation to contact the Department of Children and Family Services.
Not the child, but if there's abuse at home as far as the parent is
Well,
concerned.
that is a reason for a child to be removed from a home.
Right.
That we can find that the child is abused or neglected, a court can, and then find that it's not in the child's best interest to be in that home. Why? Because they're being emotionally scarred by watching the domestic violence, and they're also subject to being a victim because there are times when the abuser will actually kill or harm the child as a way to get at the victim. There's a case that we use as a primary way of trying to encourage the domestic relations judges to look deeper in making the determinations regarding custody, wherein there was a father and a mom, and he abused the mom for years. She finally got a divorce, and then he started to try to manipulate the system by saying that he wanted to see his son more often. And so what happened is that he would come back to court, file motions to show cause, saying that she wasn't allowing him to visit the child enough. What he did was one day is he took the child, kidnapped the child, and murdered the child. And he said, I did that because of you.
Jesus.
And so you've got to be conscious of what's going on in the home because, the child is seeing this, the child could be affected by it. And then ultimately a victim from that.
I have another question, Betty. This one is, what is the conversation that you would have with a male or a brother that you learn is controlling and abusive to his wife, girlfriend?
Get help.
Seek help.
Yeah.
Offer help first.
There's a lot of resources available, but just trying to let them know how it's impacting their family, their children. What they're teaching their children how to raise their children. So we just see that cycle go on. So just helping them understand the impact and making that call. Again, supporting them to make that call.
And on a professional level, if someone is a professional and they're found guilty of domestic violence, is there the chance that the state can revoke a law license, driver's license, or anything like that?
It's automatic deportation if you are not a citizen. And then there's also, and this has come into effect since I've been a judge, you can't have a weapon.
Cannot have a weapon.
And it cannot be expunged.
It can, and that's one of the offenses where it can never be cleared from your record.
Now, I had a case once where this guy was going to plead to domestic violence, and I was telling him all his rights, and I said, you can't be a nurse or a teacher. And the woman said, well, wait a minute. He's like going to be a nurse. He's gotten this license. And so they actually negotiated down to a different charge because she wanted him to have that job. Now, I don't know if that was the right decision or not, but there are a number of, you have to tell the defendant when they plead to a domestic violence that there are long-term consequences. Like, you can forget. I was in a class with a guy, and he said he's supposed to be a teacher, and he started telling me about his domestic violence case. And I was like, buddy, you are not going to be a teacher.
Well, some of the women aid and abet them. Let's put it like this. You can't fix him.
No.
You just don't understand what he's going through. You don't understand how he was raised. When you hear those conversations, you know that not only does he need help, but she needs a little counseling too. Because she's going to talk him through. Well, he's going to be okay. We can't assume that, but we can make sure that we're not adding to it by saying, You know, you just don't understand him. He's all alone, and, you know, his family abandoned him when he was 10 years old. When you hear those conversations, what are some of the things that you...
But you do, it's important to talk to a guy that's saying, like, you know, you better be careful because these are the things that can happen to you if you are convicted.
Yeah. Do you agree that some of them are so far out there?
Yeah.
That there's mental illness involved? Right. Do you agree that some of them, you could say that till you're blue in the face. Mm-hmm. Some of them are so out there. There's some severity to that type of level of domestic violence. Does anybody agree with that? They're gonna,
yeah, I mean, definitely. When someone has, if their mission is power and control, as evident in the recent event, nothing deters them. They have already achieved the status that, you know, they've wanted. They're in a professional position, and even still, that control can make them throw all of that away. But we have to do something, so, you know, I agree, we do want to try to educate them, but if their mind is one track and they're about that control, they're going to throw everything away to control that individual, that target that they're looking to destroy.
Ben?
We have another question. What are the legal steps you can take to prevent someone from stalking you? I feel unsafe. Is a protection order the only way to resolve this? Does it cost to file for a protection order?
It does not cost to file a protection order. They cannot charge you. The person wants to make police reports, document, besides trying to stay safe, have a support system so that you know where you're, you know, people know where you are, but check the car because there may be a device on it. I had one where he actually taped a phone to the car. He's stalking in the suburbs now, East Cleveland.
So just some
Cleveland.
practical things. I mean, just kindly just say you might have to move. I know that can be, you know, economically frustrating for you. Change your phone number. That may be another method as a way of trying to cut off communication with this individual. But, you know, aside from that, you know, the protection order is a piece of paper. That's what it is. It's not a bubble that will permanently prevent you from being harmed. No, it isn't.
If you have several instances, and especially if there are witnesses, you can have them charged with stalking. But you pretty much need to have some witnesses because otherwise it's just your word.
And I think I heard you say in the question, this person says, I feel unsafe. Yes. If they're like here right now, they feel unsafe. They need to see somebody on this panel today. Like, don't go home waiting to make a phone call. If you feel unsafe, see somebody right now because there's people here that can not just provide resources. There are people here that are just like the teachers. They have an obligation to make a report if you report to them. So speak to them while you're here right now and don't go home with the same situation. Don't leave here the same way you came.
And stay off of social media. Stop posting everything you're doing. Stop having everything tracked where you're going.
Don't.
Get you some mace. I don't want to say Smith & Wesson because you know.
Actually, that was a question that was in here. So.
But because I don't have a gun, you know, I don't promote them, you know, and that's just me because my sister was killed by one. God's been protecting me all this time. But protect yourself. Get some mace on you. Get a stun gun. You know, change your schedule. Change your pattern on how you leave your home, you know, and you go to work. Let your job know so they can understand it. If you have to leave work here and there, you know, to accommodate your change of lifestyle, to do that. Find some friends that's going to support you, you know, because you can have a protection order, but you still have to call the police and they still have to come.
Get your CCW.
I said get the CCW license, even if you don't want to carry a gun, and get a CCW license, post that online. Seriously. Then that person knows, oh, she's got a gun, or the ability to carry one, and they don't know. And so that makes you unpredictable as they are, and maybe that stops them from trying to encounter you.
What baffled me was covering a lot of court cases as a reporter. Why are so many women in Marysville victims who fought back and still went to jail?
It's the law.
What?
The average female that will retaliate and end up, and they should probably kill their abuser because, and I'm sorry, I probably said that the wrong way.
Okay.
Because if they harmed them, it would be more harmful for them. So if a male ends up killing a female partner, their average sentence is somewhere around 2 to 6 years. But a female that does the same thing, their average sentence is 15 years to life. And there are a lot of women on, life sentences for killing their abusers. And it's just a systematic thing that's been going on for a while. And those are the things, we have the Centuria Brown case that people are advocating for her to get clemency because she killed her abuser. So we just have to do things like that to advocate to get some of those laws changed.
We got to take our voting seriously because a lot of us skip over midterm elections or voting for judges just because they have the same last name that's been a judge forever. They may have that same mentality of the judge that came before them. So we got to make sure that the people that we put into these positions, that we have relationships with them, that we know who they are, where they stand, and what type of laws and how they'll interpret the law when they are the judges or those that are making the laws. That's why people like Judge Ryan to me
Thank
are very
God for
important.
you.
Yeah, because he shows
Thank
up,
God for you.
he answers the phone, and we know his heart. And if we don't know your heart, you don't always have our people or women in general in your mind.
My sister was a victim of domestic violence and was scared to leave because this guy threatened to harm her entire family. What can be done or said to assure the victim that the family will be okay? Because that is also a reason why people stay. I'm going to kill all of them. Just breaks your heart, don't it?
Talk to the family.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a large family, so they'll be going for a long time. You know what I mean? As far as like trying to kill each person.
But in their minds, they're that fearful.
Yeah,
they're manipulated to believe that he would take them all out.
Yeah. And fear is the greatest reason why they stay in the
it
relationship. So, we do a lot of safety planning, and we do that even with victims who are still with their abuser, just to know what to do when a situation comes up. Where do the kids go? What do you tell your kids? But we do safety planning and simple things sometimes that people don't think about. Drive a different way to work. Just so safety planning is really, really important.
And hang out with the family, with the mate. The family should know. So hopefully that person is not isolated. So that way she can get her family involved, or he can get her family involved, start hanging around and let the family know. Because sometimes when family comes around, they'll look at whoever the abuser is and like, okay, we here. The important thing is being here and not being isolated, letting the family, because our family is not afraid. Because when my sister was dealing with the thing she was dealing with, he's 6 feet tall, I'm 5'1"3/4. I can't do nothing to this dude, but I would still go over there and act like I was tough.
Okay.
I mean, I would have, weapons of mad destruction with me, wasn't no gun, but I'm going to fight, and I'm going to fight to win. You know what I'm saying? So it's no rules in fighting to win. So, I would always show up, but the thing is, I was always there. So just whoever the person is, get your family involved. Hang around them. If you know right now that you're not ready to go, then start getting yourself set up. Have the family come over, hang out, at the house, and maybe they can put a little fear in that mate.
But on the other hand, there was a case out in Colorado where the guy who was like the model husband, and he killed the woman and put the children in the oil can, and the family thought he was the greatest guy in the world, and she's on YouTube saying he was the greatest husband in the world. It's just mind-boggling, how these kinds of things happen.
I think at the end of the day, that person has to be ready to go. They have to be tired. We've had situations where family members have actually beat up the abuser, and the victim will leave for a couple of months and they'll go back. So that family feel like we'll go the route to beat up the abuser, to do all the above to make sure you're safe, and then you go back to them. So then when you cry, I'm ready to go, then the family is like, we're not going to go through that route again to do what needs to be done to save you because you may go back. So I think at the end of the day, that person really have to be tired, because everybody has a different limit. And so we may want them to leave. We may get tired of seeing them, but if they're not ready, if it's not out of their heart and out of their mind, they're going to continue to stay, and they're going to keep going back and forth. And then in the meantime, when you're trying to protect your loved ones, it's the innocent ones that get hurt. It's the innocent ones that get killed trying to protect the victim, and they're not ready to go.
I said earlier that you have to believe them, but I also believe that once you help them get removed from a situation, realize that that's not the end of the process. A lot of times, I've told my sister that, like, if you have a situation, if you call me, once you call me, that's it. Like, it's no questions about it. Like, and I've had that happen. Like, if you call me now, you are now reaching out for help, and I'm going to give you as much help as possible, like Michelle said. But then I also realize that if you've been going through abuse, it doesn't end once I get you out of the situation. You may have weeks, months, years of trauma that you have to deal with, and that's why a lot of people go back to these situations. So I need to make sure they're also getting the additional help that's necessary. Yeah, because if they don't have that counseling, then they'll be stuck and going to keep going back over and over and over to the same situation.
And then the other thing is, we're talking about people already in the situation, but going back to what our minister said, just being proactive. So now, let's try to prevent this before our families get into this situation. We tell our children, if you get in a car with a stranger, I don't care if they said they know me, they did this, don't get it. If they said they had me hostage, they're going to kill me, so what? Don't get in the car with them. Let's tell our family members that. Let's hold ourselves accountable and say, look, oh, you're dating a new person, you're getting ready to get married, well, let them know, or whatnot. I don't care if they tell you they're going to kill us, they're going to do whatever. If you get in a situation, don't get caught up in that. That's what we tell our children, so we can start advocating and, telling our family members and people like that proactive before they actually get in that situation.
Speaking of that, Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated Greater Cleveland Alumni Chapter is sponsoring a teen dating violence prevention summit. Come on, somebody. February, and they are inviting all Divine Nine and others to support the effort. Contact a member of DST for more information.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Here's a question. Is there such thing as a reformed or past abuser being rehabilitated?
I will say, let me start off with that. So, of course, people can be reformed, but I think what the issue is that we are misinformed about the appropriate type of programs that abusers should go to. Oftentimes they're mandated to go to anger management, sometimes couples therapies, and I was speaking to this earlier. There are studies that find that those are not as effective. We haven't found the right mixture, but if you think about it, if you're being abused and you're fearful and you're in a couple session with a therapist, how forthcoming are you going to be to share what your abuser is doing to you? And you have to leave after that week and go back home with that abuser. The same thing with anger management. If you're doing a one-on-one individual counseling session, most abusers are manipulative, they're charismatic. They don't have a sign that says, hey, I'm an abuser, date me. Right. No, they're going to, right. be charismatic. So just as charismatic as they were with their partner, they can do that with a counselor, like Judge Connolly said, a marriage counselor that was caught up in that. That happens a lot. Recently, another domestic violence advocate just got killed by her partner. So there are programs, and I haven't done the research. There are programs like abuse recovery programs where this not only addresses the abuser, but interviews their victim. That's something that anger management doesn't do. They facilitate in a group process or whatnot, so that this person now has a target of manipulating maybe 20 other people. And these programs have to be long, and we just don't have the time, but you have to have an appropriate program. And most abusers will never, ever volunteer to go to a program. They mostly have to be mandated.
To what extent do you think alcohol plays a part in this?
I think alcohol can exacerbate the condition, but I don't think it's an excuse for abuse because, and that's one of the other myths, that substance abuse or alcohol can cause a person to be violent. That truly is not the case. You know, substance abuse or alcohol cannot make an abuser out of an individual that's not abusive.
I have personally seen individuals be reformed or rehabilitated because of the dedicated domestic violence docket that we started at Cleveland Municipal Court. Now, this was a specialized docket in that myself and Judge Ronald Adrian, who actually initiated this process, we would get individuals who were, we thought, not thought, but based on the assessment that was completed by our probation department after they were found guilty of domestic violence, was actually an abuser. There are situations where individuals are found guilty of domestic violence and they're not really abusers. These are one-time situations that have occurred and they meet the definition for domestic violence, but they're not a classic abuser. But with the classic abusers, we had them complete a program that we call DIET. It's Domestic Intervention Education and Training Program, and it was created in Duluth, Minnesota. We have our probation officers go up to Minnesota, be trained, come back with that information, and then create a program for these individuals. The dedicated docket was different than the regular docket because we kept closer supervision of these individuals, and we found through studies that if you supervise them on a more consistent basis, they were more prone to accept and be receptive to the program and have better outcomes than individuals who were just placed on probation and went through anger management or went through some other type of domestic violence counseling. These individuals, I saw them once a month, and I called it a compliance docket to ensure that they were obviously meeting the requirements for domestic intervention training program, but if they had substance abuse issues or they had mental health issues, all of those were being addressed as well. Sometimes we'd also find out, well, this person's working. They may not be working. They don't have an education. So those are also requirements for them. And what I found is that the more supervision we provided for them, the more rewards that they got, the better that they were in terms of accepting, one, their responsibility, being accountable, and they were making effective changes in their lives. Now, we wouldn't allow them to have access or contact with the victims until they were into the program, maybe about 6 months. And then we would see the change for these individuals. We wouldn't allow, the only contact they would have would contact at the domestic intervention and education training meetings. But beyond that, I saw people making change. And how do I know they made changes? They would come up to me when I would be out in the community and said, "Thank you for putting me in that program. I didn't realize that I was an abuser. I didn't understand that, you know, my control of this individual was making her feel this way." And the female partner would say, "God bless you. He is a different person today. We have not had any more fights, any dust-ups, be it physical or verbal." I had one individual at the conclusion of his program start crying. An older man, he was in his 70s, and said, "I didn't have this. If I had this when I was younger, I wouldn't be in the situation I'm in today." And so it takes patience for us to do it, and also for them to be receptive and having good advocates, both the victim, witness victim, as well as good advocates in terms of your probation department.
Thank you.
Well,
Wow.
ladies and gentlemen, the thing about this is we could continue this conversation on and on and on, but actually what we think this is a point of departure where the information that you've heard here today, hopefully you'll take it back, the Divine Nine will take it back, churches, clergy, everybody will be able to go back and start these conversations to see how you can arrive at a closer understanding on how to fix this situation.
And before we conclude, can we just give our panelists a round of applause? Great information.
I just have one final thing to ask, and that is, again, I want you to see if you can put pressure on those who are federal government representatives, so senators and Congress people, more particularly Congresswoman Fudge. She doesn't know about this yet, but if you could get behind this effort, it would make a big difference. Actually, a member of Delta Sigma Theta, her name is Dr. Marcy Wilson Coleman, and she came to me with an idea that after doing some discovery and research, I found that we aren't doing now, which could have actually prevented Aisha's passing. Right now, individuals who are under the supervision of a protection order or under a temporary protection order for criminal cases, some of them are given GPS monitors. Okay, the problem that Dr. Coleman saw and that I saw is that while the GPS monitor triggers those who are monitoring them that the person has entered a forbidden area, it only triggers that particular agency, and then they call the police, or they will make a call to, they'll call the police. There's no process there where they can alert the victim, or the victim is not aware of the person being in that that enclosed area. And so her idea was to do what we do. We have the technology. How many of you have Find My Friends on your phone? If there's a way for that technology can be used so that the victim knows where that person is at all times, then that could prevent them from being accosted by that person. Say, for instance, that Aisha knew, where Lance was. He was in that vicinity. She could have decided not to go to that house that day, or decided not to get out of the car if she knew, oh, wait a minute, he's only like 5 feet, behind me, or 10 feet, or 20 feet. And so we need that technology. We can get the funds through VAWA, which is the Violence Against Women Act. And so, like I said, put that pressure there. Let them know that we want this to be available to victims, and I think it'll save some lives.
And I'll tell you the other thing, be careful who you write a letter of reference for. Oh, he's a nice guy. Right. I learned that a long time ago. You don't know these people.
There is and Ben, we're wrapping up, but there's a person here who said she was told that if she married a man, it was till death do her part. Listen, it might be that if you're in a situation where you're involved in domestic violence. Don't let it get to that point. I know you're here, and I know you wrote this for a reason. Get the help you need to save your own life. We'll worry about him a little later, but we're concerned about you tonight. And there are resources here tonight. If you're here and you feel comfortable enough, any of these people on this panel will stay and talk with you tonight. Thank you.
So we do appreciate it, and I just want to thank my brothers from a different color. We appreciate the Divine Nine, the men of the Divine Nine, stepping outside of our silos, coming together to do something fantastic to protect the women that we love and we care for.
And the Panhandle, thank you all, too, as well. Enjoy your evening. Do you have something you want to say, too? Thank you again.
Thank you all. Let's thank our moderators this evening. Thank you so much. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Betty. Thank you all. Thank you all very much. Thank our interpreters. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you very much. Again, I'm Jacques Smith, a part of the Men of the Divine Nine Committee, and it was a vision for us to come together. We had all issued responses in different fashions in the horrific killing of Aisha Frazier, and I felt, and we collectively felt, that it was time for us to come together as men and present something to the community of awareness. And we know we can't solve anything within a 2-hour time frame, but we're committed to sticking to this as an organization, together as brothers from other organizations. We care. We're fathers, we're brothers, we're sons, we're here, and we're here to stay, and we're going to continue on, and you will see us in the future doing things collaboratively together. Once again, our brothers are here. Ed Long is on our committee as well, a member of Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated. He couldn't be here tonight because he's with his daughter at her concert. So we are here representing Ed Long as well, and very appreciative of us coming together. These gentlemen came together within a couple of days, and we had a program, and they reached out to people on the panel here, just really came together with this, and I'm very appreciative of everyone on the committee and for all of you all taking your time out this evening to be here. I'll let anyone else if you want to say something right now, and then we're going to wrap up. Good? Okay. We're good? There has been some people in the back from TV 20, so it should be televised, and we'll make sure we have access of that. Yes. Yes, most definitely. Okay.
Okay.
Is that it? Okay. Well, we thank you all for coming. Thank you so much.